I've created a project in which I have two layers, a content layer and a common layer. The content layer is what I see over here on the right hand side. So as I scroll my playhead, I have information or demonstration of objects drawn with the rectangle tool, objects drawn with the ellipse tool, those drawn with the polystar tool, the line tool, and the pen tool. I'm just going to hide that layer. And my bottom layer here is called common, and it extends across all 5 frames of my project. And here I have a title, which is static text, and then I create some static text, rectangle tool, the ellipse tool, polystar, line tool, and pen tool, and turned each one of those into a button. And I gave those instance names of rectangle underscore BTN, ellipse underscore BTN, polystar underscore BTN, line underscore BTN, and pen underscore BTN. What I want to have happen is when I click on any one of these 5 buttons, I want it to go to the appropriate frame to show the content for that tool. So this is navigational programming. If I run my program right now, you notice it flashes through all 5 frames. It simply is looping through those frames just like it would an animation. So I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to name it Actions. And I'm going to put the Actions layer at the very top. I always like to have my Actions layer as the top layer unless I have a label layer that would go above the Actions. So I have a blank keyframe in frame 1 of the Actions layer. I'm going to right click on that, go to Actions, and I'm simply going to add a stop command. And the effect of that is now when I test my movie, it stops in the first frame. Now you notice as I point to the other buttons, they turn red. If I click on it, they turn blue. But nothing happens, so we have to write the code to make those work. So back in my Actions, I'm going to go to the first frame, and I'm going to add an event listener for rectangle underscore BTN dot add event listener. My event class is going to be mouse event. The event I want is the click event, and my function is going to be called go rectangle. Now I'm going to go ahead and create my event listeners for the other 4. So I'm going to copy, paste, and I'm going to change the names to ellipse, line, polystar, and pen. And I'm going to change the names of my functions here from go rectangle to go ellipse, go line, go polystar, and go pen. So next I need to write my functions. So my first function is go rectangle. Inside the parentheses is e colon mouse event. And my return type is void, my curly brackets. And what I want to have happen is have it go to and stop on frame 1. So the go to and stop command will go to one frame and stop there, just like issuing this stop command. And it's all one word with the capital A, capital S, and then inside the parentheses is the frame number. I'm just going to copy that function. Paste it in. Let's change this to go ellipse. This will be frame 2. My polystar was actually the third line, so I'll say go polystar, line 3. Doesn't matter what order I put my event listeners and what order I put my functions, makes no difference. Go line. It's going to go to frame 4. And then my last function here is go pen. And that will go to frame 5. So I'm going to click my blue check syntax button up here. Didn't give me any errors. Let's test. So it stops on frame 1. If I click the ellipse tool button, it goes to that frame. Polystar, line tool, pen tool. So these buttons all work. I can go back to the rectangle tool. So that is how we do non-linear navigation using the go to and stop command. Now there's one other way to do this, and my recommendation is to do the second way, and that is in our coding we used frame numbers. The issue though is I could actually insert a frame here and move those down, and then my programming would actually be off. So I prefer to use labels, and I'm going to add another layer here. I'm going to call it labels. And on frame 1, I have a blank keyframe. I'm going to go to the properties panel, and I'm going to give this frame a name. I'm going to call it rectangle. Notice that it adds in my timeline a little red flag on that layer at frame 1 that tells me there's a frame label, and it shows me the name of that label. As long as there's not other keyframes here, that label will extend down. I'm going to come to the second frame and add another blank keyframe, or convert it to a blank keyframe, and now I don't see that name extended down, but I'm going to add a label or a name to this frame, and my name here is going to be ellipse, and I'm using all lowercase letters. I'm going to do the same thing in frame 3, convert to a blank keyframe. This one's going to be polystar, convert to a blank keyframe, name this one line, and then my last frame here on the labels layer, I'm going to again convert to a blank keyframe and name this one pen. Okay, at this point that had no impact on anything I'm doing, but if I go back into the actions, I can change this 1 to the label of the frame that I want it to go to, and I want it to go to rectangle. I'm going to put that in quotes. On the go ellipse function, I want it to go to and stop on the label named ellipse. And by putting these in quotes, these are called literal strings. If I didn't put it in quotes, the ActionScript compiler would try to figure out what ellipse is and what a rectangle is. By putting them in quotes, it recognizes that it's some name that I gave one of these labels. So I'm going to go to and stop here on polystar. Go to and stop on the label named line and pen. And now my code's a little more meaningful to me. I wouldn't have known necessarily what frame 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is just by looking at the code. I have to go back and look at the interface. Now this sort of makes sense, and I can make sure that the label is basically matching the function name all the way down the list. Let's just test this. I'm going to click my blue check mark again, make sure I don't get any errors. Nothing came up. I'm going to test my movie. And now I can go to frame ellipse, polystar, line, pen, and back to rectangle. Doesn't matter what order I go to any of these frames. So that is non-linear frame navigation. I might also want to have some linear navigation. So in my library, I'm going to go to that application I had in the previous video, which was my button designs. And here are the various buttons that I'd created for that project. And I can borrow any one of these. I'm just going to bring in that pencil and position it. It's a little bit big for this project, so I'm going to size this down. Move it over here. I'm going to copy and paste another instance of it. And this one I'm going to flip horizontally. Have it point the other direction. So I need to give these instance names so I can refer to them in code. So I'm going to go to the properties. I've got this pencil pointing to the left. I'm just going to call it previous underscore BTN. And we'll call this one next underscore BTN. And I'm going to go back to my code. And I actually added those on my actions layer. I don't like to put things on my actions layer, so I'm just going to select those. I'm going to cut them. I want these to go across all the frames, so I'm going to go back to my common layer, and I'm going to paste those in place. And I'm going to lock my actions layer so I can't draw or add anything to it. Okay, so I've got these two buttons named previous underscore BTN and next underscore BTN. Let's go into actions. I need to add a couple more event listeners. Previous underscore BTN dot add event listener. Mouse event dot click. And my function will be named go previous. I could have named it anything I wanted. Next underscore BTN dot add event listener mouse event dot click and go next. And I need to add functions for those. So I'm going to scroll back down here to the bottom. I'm just going to select that function, copy it, paste it, and paste it twice. And I like to put a space between my functions or a blank line between them. Just personal preference. Wouldn't matter. So we had go previous. And my command here, rather than go to and stop, is going to be prev frame with a set of parentheses because it is a method. That's going to take me to the previous frame. Then I had go next, and my command here is next frame. So notice those are in blue. Those are keywords that Flash understands. So whenever it sees prev frame, set of parentheses, it's going to go to the previous frame. Next frame, it'll go to the next frame in the timeline. Let's test this. Make sure I got no errors. And so I had a couple errors that came up here. I can see the line number they're on. They're all on 33. If I double click here, hopefully it'll take me to 33. It doesn't always. And what happened was I accidentally erased my parenthesis and E. So now I'm going to check it again. No errors. Let's test. So I can take my next button and simply basically turn the page frame by frame. Now when I get to the last frame, it doesn't take me anywhere because there's no next frame. I've got the previous button. It takes me to the previous frame. Now if I didn't want to see those, I could hide them. So in my content layer, I'm going to take a stroke of black and a fill of white. I'm going to change the stroke to be no stroke, or I could have made it white. I'm going to take the rectangle tool and I'm going to draw a rectangle over top of my previous button. And since I'm on the layer above, it'll hide that button because it's on the common layer below that. I'm going to go to the last frame and basically do the same thing. So I'm on the content layer. And now when I run this, I don't see the previous button. It's there, and I can tell that it's there because I do get the little hand pointer when I come to where that button is. So I'm actually still clicking that button, but nothing's happening because there's no previous button, but the user doesn't see it. So now I've got my next button. I can go back to the previous frame. So my next and previous work. When I get to the very last frame, that next button goes away, and I'm left with just the previous. That is the basics of navigational programming in Flash.